The ancient geographer Strabo once claimed that this island could process 10,000 slaves in a single day. Not weapons, not grain, not precious metals. People. Human beings stripped, inspected, priced, and sold at a pace that would make a modern factory supervisor envious. This wasn't Rome at the height of empire, nor Athens in its golden age. This was Delos, a tiny Aegean island, barely 5 kilometers wide, transformed from a sacred pilgrimage site into the Mediterranean's most efficient machine of human trafficking. What could turn a holy island into a marketplace of chains? The answer lies where commerce, piracy, and imperial ambition collide, creating a system so ruthless that a woman could wake up free in her quiet coastal village, and within weeks fall asleep in chains 1,000 miles away. Delos, the island where humans stopped being people and became cargo. Delos, the Aegean island that turned humans into cargo. For centuries before Delos became a marketplace of chains, it was known for something sacred. The Greeks believed this was the birthplace of Apollo and Artemis. According to legend, their mother, Leto, found refuge here while fleeing the jealousy of Hera. Because of this, the island became holy ground. Pilgrims came from across the Mediterranean world. They filled Apollo's temples with offerings, gold, silver, and treasures given in devotion. Over time, the island grew so wealthy that it became the financial heart of the Delian League, holding the shared funds of Greek city-states united against Persia. But holiness could not protect it from politics. In 166 BC, after its victory in the Third Macedonian War, Rome made a single decision that changed Delos forever. It declared the island a free port. This move was meant to punish Rhodes, whose loyalty during the war had wavered. For years, Rhodes had dominated Mediterranean trade. Its powerful navy protected shipping routes, and its harbors collected massive customs revenues, funding patrols that kept pirates under control. Now, suddenly, Delos offered something irresistible. No taxes, no duties, no restrictions. Merchants abandoned Rhodes almost overnight. Within a single year, Rhodes's harbor income collapsed, falling from 1 million drachmas to just 150,000. And in that collapse, something darker rose. Without Rhodian patrols, pirates spread rapidly across the eastern Mediterranean. They attacked ships, they raided villages, and they captured people. But pirates needed buyers, and Delos was ready. Though officially administered by Athens, the island operated under Rome's protection. Anyone could arrive. Anyone could sell. No one asked questions. It didn't matter if the person being sold had been enslaved in war or kidnapped from their home in the middle of the night. Delos itself began to change. Near the harbor, new buildings rose, not temples, but markets. The Agora of the Italians, a massive colonnaded complex nearly 60 by 40 meters, allowed human beings to be moved quickly from ship to auction floor. Archaeologists believe the main auction site stood near the port at the Agora of Theophrastus. There, a circular platform known as the Kyklos displayed slaves while buyers stood around them, bidding, examining, judging, buying. The island's population exploded to nearly 30,000 people, far more than its land could naturally support. They came from everywhere: Roman plantation owners seeking labor, Greek traders, Phoenician merchants, Syrians, Egyptians, all drawn by profit, warehouses filled with human cargo waiting to be sold, temporary housing filled with dealers waiting for the next shipment. Delos was no longer a sanctuary, it was a machine. From capture to auction, the brutal supply chain of the ancient slave trade. Before a slave ever stepped onto the auction floor of Delos, they had already passed through a system built on calculation, profit, and suffering. The methods of capture exposed just how organized Mediterranean human trafficking had become. The most efficient suppliers were the Cilician pirates. Operating from hidden coves along the southern coast of Asia Minor, their ships waited in silence. From these rocky shelters, they launched sudden attacks on slow merchant vessels, especially the grain ships carrying wheat from Egypt to Italy. These were not acts of chaos. They were business operations. Pirates also targeted coastal villages where resistance was weak. At dawn, they struck quickly. By the time help arrived, dozens of people could already be gone. Women and children were among the most valuable. Adult men were often sold for brutal physical labor, but young women brought higher prices, for domestic service, and for other purposes that traders advertised without shame. Around 150 BC, the collapse of the Seleucid Empire left a dangerous vacuum. No navy remained strong enough to police the eastern Mediterranean. Rome had the power to stop it, but Rome did nothing. Roman landowners needed workers for their growing plantations. Pirates provided them cheaply and consistently. It became a perfect partnership. Pirates captured, traders sold, Roman elites bought, and no one asked where the captives came from. War created even more slaves. When the Roman general Titus captured the city of Jaffa during the Jewish wars, he ordered the men killed. The women and children, more than 2,300 of them, were sold. After crushing the rebellion of Spartacus, Rome crucified thousands along the Appian Way. But many others were simply sold. Legally, they were called prisoners of war. In reality, the result was the same: chains. The journey to market brought its own horrors. Captives were packed into shipholds so tightly they could barely move. Food and water were scarce. Disease spread quickly. Traders accepted the deaths as a normal cost of business. Women faced even greater danger. Under Roman law, slaves had no rights. They were property, nothing more. There was no protection, no justice. When the ships finally arrived, the survivors were unloaded and forced into holding pens near the harbor, iron cages and wooden enclosures where they waited to be inspected, sorted, priced, prepared. The entire system treated human beings worse than animals, because animals could not understand what was happening. But the slaves could. They knew exactly what they had lost. On the auction block, pricing, inspection, and the ritual of dehumanization. At Delos, the auction was more than a sale. It was a ritual of total domination. It began with humiliation designed to strip captives of any sense of power. Roman law treated human merchandise the same way it treated livestock. Dealers hung wooden tags, called tituli, around each person's neck. These listed nationality, origin, skills, health problems, attempts to flee, prior suicides, and any legal claims the buyer would inherit. Women were displayed unclothed. This wasn't gratuitous cruelty. It was standard commercial practice, legally mandated to ensure full disclosure. Buyers examined limbs to test muscle, teeth for age and health, and looked for scars or deformities. Captives brought from foreign lands had one foot whitened with chalk, signaling their imported status. The visual reminder left no doubt. These were property. Pricing was brutal arithmetic. Age, health, skills, and appearance determined value. A literate or medically trained slave could fetch 6 men, roughly 600 drachmas, while unskilled laborers sold for far less. Young women's prices varied depending on appearance and the dealer's assessment of potential uses. The auction itself resembled a cold mechanical commerce. The auctioneer, the praeco, presented individuals or small groups. Buyers could ask questions, demand demonstrations of skill, or have captives show their hands to prove experience in domestic labor. Roman law even included a 6-month return policy. Undisclosed defects could trigger a full or partial refund, as if the human being were defective merchandise. Some dealers openly used deception. Captives whose condition couldn't be guaranteed were forced to wear pointed felt caps, called palais, warning buyers. These slaves sold at a discount, reflecting the risk of hidden defects or violent tendencies. For women, inspection was more invasive. Buyers often probed for signs of pregnancy or reproductive potential. Primary sources do not give explicit details, but the lack of bodily autonomy meant captives endured whatever buyers demanded. The auction ended when the highest bidder claimed ownership. There was no ceremony, no acknowledgement of families torn apart, no recognition that lives were permanently altered. The sale was recorded, payment made, and imperial tax collectors claimed the 4% levy, doubled from Augustus's original 2% under Emperor Claudius. Every aspect of the process reduced humans to numbers, calculations, and commodities, a grim ritual in the machinery of slavery. Survival. After the sale, the fate of women beyond the slave market. Once the hammer fell on Delos, A woman's life depended entirely on who had bought her and for what purpose. The lucky ones, if such a word can apply, entered households as domestic servants. Wealthy Roman families needed labor for endless tasks: cooking, cleaning, childcare, weaving, fetching water, attending at baths. A woman in this role might acquire skills that slightly increased her value and marginally improved her treatment. Domestic slaves lived under constant supervision, but sometimes formed relationships within the household. They could maintain connections with other slaves, observe certain religious practices, or accumulate small amounts of money through gifts or tips. Some owners treated their household slaves with relative humanity: food, clothing, and shelter. But this depended entirely on temperament. No law protected them from cruelty. Women with specialized skills or education faced different fates. Literate women could become secretaries or tutors. Those with medical knowledge might serve as midwives or healers. Skilled artisans, weavers, seamstresses, craftswomen generated income for their owners and sometimes found marginal stability. But freedom remained impossible. Agricultural and industrial slavery offered far harsher conditions. Estates needed laborers for vineyards, olive groves, and grain fields. Mines consumed thousands in brutal conditions. Women in these roles endured backbreaking work, exposure to harsh elements, and minimal sustenance. Pregnancy worsened their plight. Any child born became the master's property. Some owners encouraged reproduction to expand their labor force. Others forced sterility with lead-based potions, causing organ failure, tooth loss, and death. All decisions belonged solely to the owner. Theoretical manumission offered a slim chance at freedom, but it was rare and conditional. Freed women still faced restrictions, and most never escaped the empire's machinery of exploitation. Archaeology records a few who managed modest prosperity, ran businesses, or raised families. But thousands simply vanished, their stories lost to history. Delos' reign as the Mediterranean's premier slave market was brief. In 88 BC, forces of Mithridates VI sacked the island, killing thousands and destroying its trade infrastructure. A second raid in 69 BC completed the devastation. Populations collapsed, trade shifted, and by the end of the 1st century BC, Delos, once processing 10,000 slaves daily, stood largely abandoned. The machinery that turned a sacred island into an engine of human suffering finally halted. Yet the system it represented, the casual acceptance of humans as property, the efficient processing of lives into labor and profit, persisted across the Roman Empire for centuries. Walking through Delos's ruins today, visitors see weathered columns, empty marketplaces, temples to gods who could not protect the thousands sold beneath the Aegean sky. The stones preserve infrastructure, but not screams, efficiency, but not terror, commerce, but not the human cost. What endured from those auction blocks was not just suffering, but a blueprint for how societies could reduce people to property. If you could have stopped a single capture before it reached Delos's auction block, saving one life but leaving the system intact, would you do it? Or would you see individual intervention without systemic change as solving conscience, but not confronting evil? The stones of Delos remember nothing. History demands that we do.